Well, hello there everyone and welcome to another stream. It's getting quite late here, but I decided to still do the second stream for today because I had to kind of interrupt the earlier stream pretty early with a memory problem. I will probably wait a couple minutes to explain that again when we have more people watching, since I announced the stream quite spontaneously. If you're already there, say hi in the chat, let me know if everything looks good and sounds good. And as soon as there's a couple more people, I'll give a short intro on what we did earlier and where we're picking up from. I'm starting to get a little tired, so I might be a little slower, a little more rambly, and I will try to do programming for as long as possible, and then later we will probably switch to some light Q&A again like we did earlier. I feel like that works very well. Well, thank you so much, Arton, for letting me know about sound and video. Let me know if you can see the screen now. In particular, if I make this bigger here, this should be comfortably readable for you. Oh, White Nord, I think you already joined the earlier stream, is that right? Do I remember that correctly? And also, yeah, you will notice here with this new setup that the picture of me looks a little bit higher quality because I'm using my DSLR camera on a tripod over there as a fake webcam, which works really well now. Only problem is that the battery doesn't actually last that long in the first stream. I think it went out after like an hour and 10 minutes. I already ordered a power supply cable for that, and then we can stream infinitely long, so at some point my picture might just freeze. And that's not because I turned to stone, but because the camera died, alright? Okay. Already 4 viewers. Let's see, like I said, a couple more minutes. Any of the two of you in the chat, if you have any questions, feel free to just shoot me a quick one now. And yeah, what's actually always really interesting for me, whoever's watching, if you want to type that in the chat, is where do you get the announcement for the live streams? Which channel do you use and prefer? How did you hear about this one? Yeah. Which laptop are you developing on and why? I'm using a MacBook Pro, as you can see here, because for quite some time I've been using Mac as my main operating system now. Only really ever kept Windows around for development and streaming and recording of the game, because the older generations of MacBook weren't powerful enough to do the video capture and coding at the same time as displaying the game, for example. Whereas this generation now is, and it can even do stream like 1080p at 60 frames per second, as I'm doing here, while still running the game fine. So I'm basically in my normal comfortable environment, and I have Linux running in a virtual machine in here, and I have Windows installed as a separate bootable operating system, so I can actually boot into native Windows. So I can actually deploy Citybound on all three platforms from here. And at the same time, I can easily bring it on travels or wherever I'm going, which is really great. I'm really happy about that. So Arteon is asking that he's been off the news of developing for quite some time. At what point are you with developing? What are you working on? Let me just give you the very short high-level gist. In the past couple prototypes, I worked on the economy, so we had roads, traffic, and basic economy like you would expect to see in a village. Then I started to work on zoning and implementing the user interface with that, and noticed that it was really quite hard to do. because a lot of the assumptions that went into road planning were like overly specific. At the same time, I wasn't really happy with how I implemented the road laying interface this time around. I liked much better in the original JavaScript prototype. And I realized that there's a simple underlying system which I could use for all kinds of planning, both for roads as well as for zones. Yeah, great. Let me just use this question to segue into my usual intro. So I took the time now, and that's what we're actually doing now during this hackathon, which is a little more than a week. Let me quickly connect my iPad here to my laptop so I can show you this drawing, which I always use to explain that. The idea for the new planning system is that everything that you want to create in your city, you specify using what I call a gesture, which is basically here this collection of line segments connected by these control points, which you can create and draw and move around. And they can have different meanings. For example, these ones here refer to roads which you want to be built, and you can see that you can specify the number of lanes on each side here. And what the game is supposed to do, and this is what we're currently implementing, is that it approximates the lines with like nice curvy lines in a nicer way that the curvy roads work right now, because I realized both with myself as well as with test users and online videos and in reality that that's really hard to use and unpredictable, so came up with something simpler for that. And then in the last step, it generates the actual roads, finds the intersections between them, and creates all the kinds of transitions that you would want. And the same system can then be reused for zones, because in the end, zones are also just arbitrary shapes defined by control points. And yeah, we're first making it work for roads. In the past couple days, we implemented the basic theoretical architecture of this kind of idea of gestures, and that a plan is really just a collection of gestures, and that the city is represented by what I call a master plan, capturing all the gestures of everything that you've built so far. And then this plan can be augmented with what I call proposals, which is basically also a plan that contains all the changes that you might want to apply to your city in the future, which you can edit and move around and undo and redo on until you're happy, and then you apply it, and then this proposal gets merged with the master plan. From that, you derive which new roads need to be built, which zones need to be changed or updated, maybe which roads need to be destroyed, which buildings need to be destroyed, and that happens. Currently, regarding the implementation, we're at the point where we implemented the interface for drawing these lines and moving the dots around, but it never really ran. We ran into some simple runtime errors, and we were just fixing them in the stream earlier today, until I had one particularly nasty memory bug, which was in like a really low level thing, and I fixed that, and it was the kind of thing where you like, basically with memory bugs, the debugger and everything can't even tell you where it happened or why, and you need to consider all of the things which you changed recently, which you introduced, which might cause that, and then it's like a game of guessing and testing, which I did for several hours, and the actual fix turned out to just be a one-line code change, as often is the case. But now it works, and I just did a tiny more work, so our rendering code is actually called now, and I actually took a pause right there and waited until the live stream now, so we can together witness for the first time how just a simple clicking interface works and the dragging interface works. There's already one small bug when moving around the dots, and that's just something really nice to show, I think, where the game runs, but there's a thinking mistake in the code, and you can see that very obviously and visually. It's almost, I always like when bugs become visual. It's really fun. So before we get started, let me just quickly see what people wrote in the chat. Please, for the people who never heard this explanation, like you are tuned, for example, let me know if that made sense. This is like, I think, the third or fourth time that I explain this plan. I'm trying to make it a little better every time, a little more compact, a little more understandable. So let me know if that makes sense, or if there's anything missing in there that would be needed for clarification. So, okay, 2 people got notified by YouTube. Interesting. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. I'm very glad to hear that. Thanks for letting me know that. See how many people we have now. 6 concurrent viewers. Okay. I'm also, with these live streams, really trying out a couple different times during the day when I do them to kind of cover people around the world in different time zones. So, yeah. Okay, cool. Hi there, Nate, by the way. So, what can we do? We can actually run the game and see what already works and see what the bug that I was talking about looks like, and realize that the fix is probably quite simple. So here we have the game running. You can see here that I actually left the old road drawing mode in there, so if I activate that I can just draw roads in the good old way. But I can also go ahead and use our new gesture planning mode, activate that, and you can see I can already create one of these lines just like in our sketch. And I should in theory already be able to move around these dots. So if I grab this one and move it, see that it moves, but whoa, kind of runs away. And it's the classical thing where, I mean, okay, let's make a puzzle out of this. You see this behavior of what's happening. Let me grab another one. I grab this one and I drag it, but it just like runs off into the distance. What does that mean? If I drag it there, it runs off there. If I drag it there, it's like overshooting super hard. Probably if you're a programmer that had to do with graphical stuff or any kind of game development work where you have to constantly update things, you might already have an idea of what that could be. For everyone else out there, let's do a quick small puzzle, and if you have a suggestion of what could be the problem, just type it in the chat and then we'll debug it together. Also, let me compile the game in release mode, because right now it was in debug mode still from debugging the memory bug earlier. If I switch to release, it optimizes it much more when compiling, and it runs better. You saw that now it only ran at 20 FPS, and when we compile it like this, it should definitely run at 60. Okay. Right, who of you is already puzzling? It's adding extra movement to the graphic each update. Yeah, that... Yeah, but Huide, by the way, is that how to pronounce your name? I've got no clue. You're exactly on the right track. Like, we're adding something on each update, but that's not what we want to be doing. I mean, the tricky part for you is that you don't know how I currently implemented it, where let me actually show you how I implemented it to make it a little fair. So in our plan manager, we have this message handler, move control point, which we call when we interact with this dot on the screen. And it takes a proposal ID, so we know which proposal we're editing, a gesture to know which line we're editing, point index to know which point on this line we're editing, and then a delta, which is a two-dimensional vector, and then we move the point here by this delta. And where does this delta actually come from? If we look here, that's where we define our control point interactable, so the clickable thing on the screen you can see. And when we drag the mouse on it, either when the drag is ongoing or the drag is finished, we take the position in the world where we started dragging, which is called from here, and the position in the world where we stopped dragging, which is called to, and we calculate the difference between them. So in geometrical terms, that means like the direction, the line which connects them, the vector which connects them, and then move the control point by that much. But the problem is, if you think about it, since we do this every time while the drag is ongoing, we just add it again and again, even though we kind of only want to do this operation once. So the game is still building. That will take quite some time. One easy fix, I will actually do something simpler first that works, and then show you how that's still not optimal, and then we can think together of how we can make it really the most user-friendly. So something obvious would be that we say, okay, when we move the control point, we don't specify by how much we want to move it, because that's kind of tricky to figure out. We actually just want to specify to where it should go, because like it should always go to where the mouse currently is, which you remember earlier was this field called to. So we would just want to specify the absolute position, the absolute new position for this point, instead of specifying the distance of how much it should move. So let's just change this here, call this new position. And this is now actually not a two-dimensional vector, but a two-dimensional point. And then we don't even need to know the old point position. We actually just set it to the new position, right? Okay, we do that, and then in the interactable for the control point here, we actually don't care. Hold on, the game is starting. Let me close that. We actually don't care about this delta here anymore. We don't need to calculate that. We just say, okay, the point should go to wherever the mouse currently is, which is exactly this to field here. And this is a really simple fix. This will do something that's almost perfect, and I will show you how it's not completely perfect. Now I have to rebuild the game again. I hope that code, our changes are correct. No. Okay, the problem is, okay, the build will fail. Ever. 2 is actually a three-dimensional point in the world, but we only care about its 2D position because basically so far everything is flat. So we just convert it to 2D. That should do the trick. Hi there, Jagadilio. Nice to have you again. Okay. Why is this not what we want? Or how is it called? Is it into 2D? Yeah. Okay, good. So now we can actually run the game again. I will explain this again because I just explained it in the first couple minutes. It's already quite late for me. I still decided to do the second stream today kind of because I promised it, and because now we get to the really more fun, more visual kind of programming work where we can iterate and try something, and we're not in a stage as we were basically the past couple days where we're just thinking and writing code and hoping that it will do the correct thing and then having to fix bugs before we can even see the game running. And I will again just go for as long as I can concentrate on programming, then we'll switch to some Q&A, either with the chat or if there's people around with microphones, we can have a live call, which would be lots of fun. So let me know if you would be up for that, if you have something to talk about. And then we will probably wrap it up quite early, but I feel like I can probably go until 1 a.m. my time. I think I'll manage that. And then I'll be back with more live streams tomorrow. Okay, so let's again draw a gesture. And now we should be able to move the points around and they should follow our mouse. Looks good, right? Looks like it does the right thing. Now, okay, there's something like a super tiny detail where I will actually leave it up to you guys whether you say that's important right now or that's not important. Let's move on. You see, if I zoom in, this circle has a certain radius, and if I basically what I want to happen when I drag it is that it moves below my cursor exactly as much as my cursor moves. So I expect the exact point where I click below my cursor to stay below my cursor. But what happens if I like take it on the like very edge here and then move it around? You see that it jumped with the center, so it's now directly above my cursor, which is actually not what I want, especially if I just want to make small edits. I don't want, sorry. I don't want it to jump every time. That's interesting. Why can't I click? Oh, probably here, yeah. You see that it like always jumps because it doesn't move by as much as I drag, but it moves to, so it's below my cursor. And that's actually where the original bug came from. But what I need to do is I need to remember where it was originally. I need to remember where I started dragging it. I need to remember where I stopped dragging, and from that I can derive the new absolute position of where it should be, which is slightly different than what I'm currently doing, where I just move it so the center of it is aligned with the mouse. It's a tiny detail. Let me know in the chat whether you want to fix that right now or if we forget about it and do the next major steps, basically. Yeah, you see where the bug came from now. And I don't know, I just always really like these kinds of, like you think about it and it seems correct, right? But then when you interact with it for the first time, the thinking mistake is just so blatantly obvious in a funny way almost. Okay, so the first person to write in the chat what we should continue with will decide. Should we fix this tiny mistake or continue with something bigger? Probably we could have fixed it in the amount of time that I took to ask you about it, but hey, whatever. Audience participation. Maybe more interesting to move to more complex stuff. There you go. Hi there, Andre, by the way. So what is next? If we look again, is this still here? No, it's not. Need to share the screen again. Okay. Okay, there's actually some more basic things that we need to do before we can move on to this next step, which are really simple. One of them is that I want to be able to finish my current stroke, which I would suggest to do by double clicking. Right, that makes sense. That's what you would expect. So we can draw several strokes, and probably we don't need the deletion of control points yet. That's something we can do later. That's less interesting. That's just a small detail. But we definitely, for our testing, will need to have several gestures. So we need to think of a way to finish our stroke and to start a new one, right? So let me run the game again and show you what I mean and why that's a bit tricky. So the thing is that right now we have, if we go into this mode, we have two kinds of interactable elements. One of them is an invisible canvas, which now covers the whole map after I activated this gesture planning mode, which is responsible for starting a new gesture when I click for the first time, adding points to this gesture as I'm going, and that's what it does. Now the second kind of interactable is the control points themselves, where I can click them and move them around now, which works really nicely. The way I implement it is that the control points take priority over the infinite underlying canvas in being responsible for handling mouse events, because if I click on an existing point, I don't want to create a new one accidentally, which the canvas would do if it would get the mouse event. I want to move the point around. But for the last point, if I click somewhere where there's no point yet, the canvas handles it and it adds it. But now I want to implement the logic that if I click and I want this to be my last point, I want the logic to be that if I click on it, I consider this gesture done, and the canvas should actually go back to its initial mode of starting a new gesture when I click the next time. Makes sense, right? Yeah. So how do we handle this? Probably what we want to do, we can make the logic less specialized, because basically when I click on any existing control point of this gesture, whoops, I want to finish this gesture, because like if let's say, okay, I started drawing this gesture and now I consider it done, but I immediately want to move this point, then I also want to mark this gesture as done and reset the state of the canvas, right? So since the control points each are individual actors and the canvas is an individual actor which can send and receive messages to each other, if we actually tell the control points the identity of the canvas so they can address messages to it, what we can do is that as soon as you click on any of the control points, it sends a message to the canvas telling it, hey, switch your mode from extending the current gesture to the initial mode of waiting for the first point of a new gesture. I hope that made sense. Let's go to the code and do it. So the gesture canvas basically needs to support it needs a message handler for finishing the current gesture. So yeah, I mean that's really all that it needs to do. It doesn't need any more information than that. So, and what should happen is that we set our current mode. I don't know why I don't get autocomplete here, that's weird. To be gesture canvas mode. Let me quickly reload the window, or do you want autocomplete here? Sometimes the Rust plugin gets stuck. Reloading helps. So I want to set that to, yeah, okay, no, there we go. Start new gesture, which means that the next time we click somewhere, it will actually start a new gesture instead of adding the control point to the current one. Now for our control point interactable, this basically needs to have the identity of the current canvas that we have, so it can send it this message. So we need, when we create this interactable, we actually need to provide a canvas, which is our, yeah, it's called gesture canvas ID. Well, very cool that you tuned in, Timelapse Worlds. I'm glad that you enjoy it, and thank you for your kind words. So given that, now when, okay, we can now assume that the control point interactable knows the identity of the canvas and can send it messages. We will actually in a second make sure that it gets that canvas when we create the control point interactable. So now in our user interface event handler, as soon as the drag is started, which represents the moment in time where you click on it, when you start clicking on it, at this point we want to send a message to the canvas to reset its mode, right? So on drag started, and we don't care about the details of where you clicked, just you clicked on the dot, right? we actually want to do two things. Self current canvas reset, how did we call it? I don't get autocomplete yet because of some weird indirection of my custom stuff that I did. It's just called finish gesture, right? Yeah, right. Sorry for my confusion there. So here, in this case, we send the finish gesture message to the current canvas, and then we don't want to do this dragging logic, so we just say that here what we return as a drag info, we just say that there is none. Just in this case do nothing, only when the drag is ongoing or finished we actually want to move the point. When we start moving the point, just want to send the finished gesture message to the canvas. Let's see if the compiler will complain about anything, but apart from that it should just work, and we should be able to create several gestures on the screen. There's an error somewhere. Oh right, we forgot to actually, when we create the control point interactable, we actually need to give it the current canvas, and I give that here. So this will now create a problem here where we actually, here you can see for all gestures in our current plan, for all points in there we create such an interactable, and there we actually need to provide the current canvas, which is is that how it's called? No, I think it's just called canvas. Yeah, it's just called canvas. Now you see here that the canvas here is an option, which means that it might not exist. But at the point where we recreate the control point interactables, we should really already have a canvas, and we expect that here, so we actually use this expect and provide an error message in case that's not true, so the game crashes with this error message showing us where the bug is, because we should really already have a canvas. Should already have a canvas. Okay, so now we have the current canvas, and we can pass that to the control point interactable. I think it was in this argument position. And then we should be ready. No, mix them up. Yeah, let's flip them. Try again. That looks better. Okay, cool. We can build the game again and see if it works. I'll tell you, I'm getting really tired of sitting. I'm sitting a lot in this hackathon. It's kind of extreme. I need to somehow create an improvised standing desk here. Or maybe alternatively also just go outside sometime. No, that always helps. Yeah, but I have to say I really enjoy focusing that much on Citybound. And I already said that in the previous stream, but I really extremely enjoy doing the streams. And I'll try to do that more often even after the hackathon. Not like out of obligation or because, like, not even because I think it's cool for you. It's cool for you, and that's cool if you like it. But just because I enjoy it so much myself, it's just something that I do for myself. think what this is about is really just that I discovered that I like talking to myself in an empty room. Hey there, Thomas. Cool that you could make it. Yeah, you might notice me trying to awkwardly bridge the compile times with monologue. As someone completely unfamiliar with Rust, why does it take so long to compile? Is that common? Is the codebase that big? Any way to optimize it? So Rust is actually pretty slow in compiling. It's now compounded because I'm also capturing the screen and live streaming, which, like I said, the MacBook can handle it, but it does take a lot of CPU. So the compile times is roughly twice as long as it would usually be. Usually it takes 60 seconds, which is still really long. Can't really judge whether the code base is big. It's around, I think, 20k lines of code, if that's any sensible measure. But yeah, compile times with Rust are just still bad. They're working really hard on it, I think, also on incremental compilation. But basically, if you're interested in it, the technical reason is that they use as part of the compiler something called LLVM, which actually takes already a simplified representation of the code and then compiles that into like really tightly optimized native code. And it does all kinds of throwing away unused code, finding how code can be simplified, how it can be compressed, and all of these really complicated tricks, which is great because that means that we end up with a really well-performing game. But the problem is that the way the Rust compiler has been written so far is that since they have the luxury of having this existing LLVM project, they don't really touch the code much themselves. They just give dump a lot of code onto LLVM, of intermediate code I mean, without having done any optimizations themselves that are Rust specific, for example, and then they just like dump LLVM with gigabytes of data, and it has to throw away 99.9% of it. Okay, not that bad, but a lot. It has to throw away a lot, and it has to do a lot of CPU work that wouldn't necessarily be needed, and that's why it's slow, basically. Did I talk about the memory bug from earlier already? Yeah, I talked about it in the first couple seconds. It was exactly the kind of stupid memory bug where you have to guess where it comes from based on the code that you added. The debugger won't help you with that. I managed to find it after like 2.5 hours maybe, and the fix was, of course, a one-line code change. That's just how it is, but I think we can all be glad that I did that on my own and not on stream. So let's see if we can draw a gesture and finish it by clicking again on the last point. No, that actually crashes it, holy shit. That's fun. Expect failed. At which point? Let's see here the output. So it failed at gotta be valid. Oh, love my error messages. And the stack trace is, where does it happen? In the rendering code for Plan Manager. Oh, so okay, so what's happening is, if we look at this point in the rendering code, that's actually, give me a sec, that's probably exactly here, where we draw the lines in between the dots, and what happened is that it probably correctly changed the mode of the canvas back to finish the gesture, but then when we lift the mouse, it still executes the logic for adding a new point, right? Wait, no, I'm confused. because we should first send the message to finish the gesture. Basically, what that here means that we hit this expect is that we create a line between 2 points that are infinitely close to each other, and it like says that's not a valid line. And that's why we get the crash. So now we need to think about what could have caused that to happen, that we get 2 points directly next to each other. So we have to go through the actual flow of what happens. So we click on our control point interactable. That's what happens first, right? So we go into this case, drag started. We send finish gesture to the current canvas. Is that right? Yeah. Then, okay, we might accidentally move the last dot around a little bit when we let go of the mouse, but that doesn't really matter. What else? I'm a bit puzzled here. Oh, cool. Glad that you appreciated the LLVM explanation. Let's look into the canvas. So when we finish here, when we finish the gesture, we just reset the mode. And what does that cause to happen? I want to interact with the game again. I don't quite get it yet. Okay, here we go. Click to start at some points. Now we want to finish, and I click exactly there again. I click somewhere else, now it starts a new one. Okay, so this time it worked. Let's try again. Okay, I will even move the mouse a little bit, click again, and this one should be done, and I start a new one. Okay, now if this time I don't move the mouse at all, then I get the... Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so this is actually a bug in my user interface library, because what happens is basically when I move the mouse, I go through all the interactables in my world and see which one is currently below the mouse. So kind of like a hover in web interfaces. And that does the correct thing. It knows kind of which layer, I called it priority earlier, the different elements are on. It knows that at the base there's this infinite canvas, at the top are the rings, which you can actually drag around. And it knows that as soon as I go over a ring, this becomes like kind of the focused or active user interface element, and if I then do a drag with the mouse, this should get the drag event. What we just saw happen is that when I draw the last dot, and I move the mouse a tiny bit and then click the last dot, it correctly finishes the gesture. Whereas if I draw the last dot and don't move the mouse a single pixel, and click again, something goes wrong. And what goes wrong is that the canvas gets the event instead of the newly created control point, and it creates a second control point at exactly the same location, causing the line drawing code to draw an infinitely tiny line, which it doesn't like. It explodes, it complains. So the problem is that the UI library doesn't update which element is below your mouse, which is the hovered interactable, if you don't move the mouse. But the thing is that even when the mouse is not moving, the elements below the mouse might change, and I might still need to update that. So so we actually need to go in there and fix the user interface library. And also Matt Williams looked very closely and realized that when I slightly moved the mouse at the end for the last click, the final node moved a bit, which is the same problem as earlier, where it basically interprets that as a very short drag. And since we used the simple implementation of just moving it to the mouse position instead of doing it properly, where we take into account that you might click on the node off center and we actually don't want to move it, that's the same issue and it will be fixed at the same time. I actually don't know if you were there earlier, Matt, when we talked about that, so really good observation. So let's go into let's first stop the game. Let's go into the engine code, and the UI library is actually called StageMaster, because I like to think about the UI as a kind of theater stage that presents something to you. If we go in user interface here, we can see that the user interface is quite complicated. It's keeping track of a lot of things, and one of these things is which is the hovered interactable. Oh, cool, yeah. Which is the currently hovered interactable, and blah blah blah. Lots of code here. Let's try to find the code here. If we get a window event mouse input, actually no, that's when we click, when the mouse moves. Wait, where do we actually update the hovered interactable? Okay, so let me explain some more, and I guess that's a cool opportunity to show you how some of the engine code works internally. What's happening is that, of course, you're moving the mouse on a 2D screen, but we're interacting with a 3D world, so we want to know the 3D position in the world that you point at through your monitor, right? And so when the mouse moves, what we actually do is when we move the mouse, we tell the renderer, which takes care of like where the camera is in the 3D world, please project this 2D point on the camera, which is our screen, into the world and tell me where's the 3D position where that like ray that you're pointing with hits the ground. And then when the renderer comes back and replies with the projected 3D position, then we actually know what in the 3D world we're pointing at, and then we can figure out what should be the new hovered interactable, right? So and that's cool. Like we in a way we only need to update that when the mouse moves, sure, but now we just learned that we also need to update it when we add or remove interactables, right? So ideally we wrap all of this in a new function, on the user interface, right? where we, yeah, let's call it up or find hovered interactables, since there can be several, I guess. No, there can only be one hovered one. We should have all the information we need, and then in there yeah, basically all of this here is what we need to do. This is the code for finding the hovered interactable. Put that in here. Instead of that all there, yeah, we need to find the interactable has a shape that contains the 3D position of our cursor. Never mind the into to do here, that's confusing. It's really about the 3D position of the cursor. And now we can say that, okay, we want to do this, of course, where we used to do it, when we get the new projected 3D position. Of the mouse cursors. So here we do find hovered interactable. But then we also need to do that whenever we add or remove 3D interactables to our state, right? So, okay, why is all of this red? Oh, we actually need to have a world here so we can send messages. Hi there, I guess, Luciano, I don't know. Cool, really glad that you like it, good to have you. Yeah, there's not much Rust in production yet still, right? More and more, I mean, there has been some big companies starting to use it, which is really cool, but you still don't really see it around much, at least I don't. So, okay, let's find the point here where our message handler for adding new interactables. Basically, here we want to find hovered interactable, because when we add a new UI element, we might just happen to add it below the cursor, right? So we want to update that there. This should fix our case. And also if we remove elements, right? Because, yeah, we don't want to continue sending it stuff after it's been removed. And yeah, that should fix that. Here we actually start needing the world parameter. Let me actually make this smaller again so I can always see the chat. Here's a problem. Whatever, that's also correct. No errors, so we can rebuild the game. Let me know, everyone, if in the meantime you had any questions. Yeah, I mean, Citybound is completely open source. It contains a lot of custom handmade code just for the engine of Citybound. It's kind of like specialized for Citybound. There are people in the Rust community after my presentation in October at Rustfest expressed a lot of interest in the actor system library, for example, to have that available for general use. The thing is that, like, yeah, sure, that would be cool, but it's really one of my lowest priorities. Like, I'm really focused on getting the game out and getting progress there. I would be happy if someone wanted to help me to maintain that for general use case, because I think it's really something that's missing in the Rust ecosystem, a proper high performance actor system such as we're having here. But it's really targeted for Citybound and the kind of requirements that I have for that, and it would takes some effort to make it more generally useful. Yeah, any other questions, any other comments? We should try to invent some like fun activity that we can do while compiling. I mean, probably you know the classic XKCD, right? I even have it in my autocomplete here. So the number one programmer excuse for legitimately slacking off, my code's compiling. Well, what can you do, right? What does the alt text say? Okay, whatever. Guess you got the point. Still building. There we go. Yeah, hopefully after we complete this simpler implementation of planning, I think that should reduce the number of lines of code actually by quite a bit, because the current road implementation is really complicated and long. So maybe it will even become a bit faster after we remove that. So what were we trying to do? Oh yeah, if I don't move the mouse. So if I click, 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 didn't move the mouse, click again, that did the correct thing. Again, let me try. Now on the last point I move the mouse a bit, I click, that should definitely work. Now if for the next gesture I click, don't move the mouse a single pixel, click again, that also works perfect. Let's see, just out of curiosity, if we go back to the existing road interface, if that, where could that even happen here? I don't know. I really don't know. Okay, whatever. Well, we fixed it. Hooray! Use Docker for what? Quick question, I've seen you talk where you explain you move from Node.js to C++ to Rust, but I don't get much why don't people choose to do some hybrid solutions, since Node would fulfill the async tasks and Rust the CPU bound task. Any special reason? Asking because I'm starting to learn some hybrid architectures. That sounds a bit confusing. What do you mean by Node would fulfill async tasks? Like what? I mean, basically, what the actor system does is it makes everything asynchronous, even the high performance stuff, which is really cool because that is what makes it possible to have a simulation that easily scales across processor cores as well as even different machines. So you could have several connected computers running something. So not quite sure how Node would be useful there. Well, Marco, it's great to have you. You're going to start getting overwhelmed busy during the second half of the semester. Well, that's unfortunate to not have you around. Whatever keeps you overwhelmed or busy, I wish you the best of luck with that. Let me know. I don't know how much time you have today, Marco. If I remember, I actually don't remember which time zone you're in. But if you want to have a quick call towards the end of the stream, oh, there's all of my reminders. Yeah, so much for do not disturb mode. I thought I had that on. What the hell? Oh no, I forgot. Well, yeah, Marco, let me know if you feel like a call later. If not, that's of course perfectly okay. I just really liked all of our previous codes. It was really interesting. Jaggedy Leo, you have a server in my basement with near zero usage that I could donate for compiles. It's bandwidth constrained but fast. What? What the hell? Am I still streaming? Yeah. I think Safari just crashed. Yeah, Safari just crashed. At least it's smart enough to reopen that for me. Oh yeah. Let's wait for all the chat messages to replay. Oh, so much amazing conversation already. It's like I see my life scrolling past my eyes. Almost there, almost there. Okay, getting back to the topic of the server. By the way, is my camera still working? I'm still moving? Yeah, okay, cool. That would probably actually be really cool if you're serious about this. I assume it's a Linux server, right? Do you want to give me some rough specs on the CPU and RAM? Like that would be... Yeah, I noticed, thanks. We could actually think about it. That would be fun. Both for the... Yeah, I mean, it would be fun to see if that, like, sending the code there, having it compile there and getting it back is actually faster than compiling it locally. Well, I guess it wouldn't work if I want to compile it for Mac, right? Yeah. I mean, I'll think about it. It's holy shit, 72 gigabytes of RAM. You know what? Rather than builds, which I need to do multi-platform anyways, and yeah, I can cross-compile to Mac, but I think that's really complicated to set up. I didn't manage it yet. I think I'll continue to building here, but with these kinds of specs, it would definitely be super cool to try, like, as soon as I have multi-core support, to just build it, like, let your server run a huge city and then just have like a normal computer connect to it and render it. As soon as I have something near that, I'll come back to you and we'll see how much of a city we can fit into 72 gigabytes of RAM, okay? That would be fun. Let me know if you would be up for that. Can you not have a Mac container? No, I don't think you can have Mac virtualization on Linux. I think you need Mac hardware for that. Yeah, that's what I mean with stress testing. Okay, super cool. Looking forward to that. Thanks so much for the offer. That's a cool idea. Might take some time until we can actually use these kinds of resources. Yeah. I mean, like, sure, the build server is cool, and I actually have I'm using something that goes so much into the background that I forgot the name of the service. Holy shit. It's not Jenkins. That can't be true that I forgot that product name. Getting old, you know. Let's look here. What am I using? Oh right, Travis, of course, Travis. Because they have a free tier for open source software, and I'm using that for the builds. And that's working quite fine. Yeah, thanks there. Yeah, you can have a Hackintosh, but that... No, you can't have it in a VM. You need either like original Apple hardware or a Hackintosh, which is basically hardware that just happens to be compatible with it. which is, I think, it's easier nowadays to do it, but yeah, wouldn't work on the server as far as I know, which is kind of stupid, but hey. Yeah, really. Which is why I actually with Travis they offer Mac build services for you to compile on Mac, for example. But they actually have to run that on Mac servers. Like they need to have dedicated hardware just for that, which is crazy for me. But hey, that's Apple, I guess. Okay, where were we? We were at our stuff is working and we can continue. Cool. Let's look at this drawing again. So now we can actually continue with the next step. And doing the transition from these gestures to first just the rounded lines, or maybe we can do that in one big jump. No, let's do it step by step. Let's do it smaller so we can iterate on it better. So now we need to extend our theoretical framework a little, because now, okay, we have the raw gestures, we can move them around. But what we want now is, from these raw gestures, we want to create prototypes of road lanes, right? We want to have a like small preview of where there will be a road lane. So we need to, we need to generate from our gestures a prototype of the roads that we will create at some point in the future. And first we will just say that the prototype for this road is this curved line, so we can implement the algorithm for that and have like a super simple approximation of a road, and then later we extend it so it actually draws the lines, finds the intersections and so on, right? But first, let's actually do a commit here, because like we're accumulating a shit ton of Wait, did I move stuff around? Well, I guess so. If I stage all of that, okay, these are all just renames. That's fair enough. First version, first runnable version of the gesture interface with just basic gesture editing. Whatever. Let's commit all of that, and then we will hopefully have smaller commits. Branch is still called December 2017 prototype. Little late on that one, but hey. So we need to introduce the concept here. I mean, okay, with things like that, naming is always really important. And this preview of prototypes of what we're about to create is basically something. No, it's not purely UI. It's actually important both for the UI as well as an instruction of which actual things to construct in the future. Like, yeah, we need to calculate the lanes of the road based on the gesture to display a preview of how the road will look. But then we will also need this information to know later where to actually like draw the asphalt for the actual road to be built, and to create that road as a road that works for cars. So let's try to find a good name for that. I would suggest that it's a prototype of something plannable or of something planned. I'll go with prototype for now, and maybe we can invent a better name later. Yeah, of course, you're completely right, Hannes. You should always do small commits, make stuff a lot more followable. And usually I do tend to have quite small commits, but sometimes it happens that like I unexpectedly change my plans, like here where I just wanted to add zoning and then like, oh, I actually have to completely change the way planning works in general, and there's a much simpler way to do it. And then of course I end up with this huge commit because I renamed the whole old system, I introduced a whole new system, and suddenly I have like tons of new and changed files. But that's just what it is. Sometimes you can't avoid it. From here on I will try to make the commit smaller again. So we want to introduce what do we actually want to introduce? Okay, I'll borrow some terminology from the old implementation because I felt like it made sense. We have plans now consisting of gestures. Each of the gestures has an intent. That's defined here, which can either be a road intent or a zone intent. These look like this. So road intent just has two pieces of metadata, which is the number of lanes on each side of the road which you're about to create. The zone intent can have several different meanings, like you want to draw a shape and that allows a certain land use within the shape. You want to draw another shape that specifies the maximum height for building there, and you can kind of combine them by overlapping them. So based on a plan consisting of these gestures, you want to create a preview of the resulting structures from this plan, right? So that would be lanes and intersections for roads, and well, just effective zone shapes for zones. Could be other stuff like railroad tracks, walls, ditches, whatever. But for now we're just doing that. So how to call all of that? It's something that results from a plan, but it's also kind of a prototype, right? So we have two things here. One thing is what I would call a plan result. And that consists of a bunch of prototypes. We want to do it similarly to the gestures. We probably want the prototypes to have unique IDs so we can refer to them later, keep track of which ones are built, which ones we already have, and so on. So let's also do a hash map here from a prototype ID to a prototype. We'll define both of these things right now. So prototype can be one of several things. Prototype. And let's just keep it very strict here. We can have a road prototype, which we will subdivide again, and zone prototype. What is a road prototype? Well, that can be... What can it be? It can be a lane. Right? Yeah, right. It can be a lane which is defined just by its path, which is like a curved path. So that's a C path here. Or we can have an intersection which, if I remember correctly, consists of a bunch of lanes. Okay, sorry for that's subdivided once more. Abstract lane prototype. That's just that actually just contains a CPath. Here we have a lane prototype. Intersection actually consists of a collection of lane prototypes, which is like the connection lanes on an intersection, connecting all the incoming and outgoing lanes. And there I actually need to quickly cheat and look in the old implementation, because what's also important for the intersection is basically something that specifies traffic light timings. Actually, for that I just need to look into transport. No, transport. Transport planning old, right? Road plan result, intersection. What does that look like? As a shape. Do we need to know about incoming and outgoing? I guess not. Okay, let's just remember this for now, that we have these timings. Timings. I mean, that's getting really deeply nested, but I just want to nail it down right away so we can do everything that we need. Timings is apparently a vector of booleans. Yeah, okay, I think that makes sense. Yeah, we'll probably not get around to re-implementing the intersection logic in this stream. That's probably even something that I want to do off stream, because it's quite involved. I mean, I have the existing algorithm in the old implementation. I want to adapt and simplify it a bit for the new one, but that's probably something where I really need to concentrate, and also it's boring, so I would do it off stream. Okay, cool. Let's just try. Let's see how late it is. Oh, it's already after midnight, which means that it's time for my midnight pretzel, which is a tradition that you might not be aware of, but actually every German should exactly at midnight, which I missed unfortunately, eat a pretzel. Do that every day. If you're already asleep, you wake up to eat your midnight pretzel, so cheers. It's still so fresh. Didn't dry at all since the morning. Love it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna need a bit more to drink. That was a bad idea. Who called themselves an international broadcasting corporation? I'm conflicted now because I'm a little hungry, so I would like to eat more of that pretzel, but also it's really dry. Let's try another bite. Then I'll actually stand up, get some more water, move a little bit, and I think we can go for another kind of, another part of programming. It's crazy, somehow during this live stream I became more awake than I was before and I didn't consume any caffeine, at least now. Let's take a small break. I'll be back in like 5 minutes with some new water. If you have any questions in the meantime, post them in the chat. I'll go over them when I'm back. See ya. Hey everyone, we are back. Apparently last time I came back I shocked everyone because they didn't expect to hear me again. Try to be a little more subtle this time. "25 concurrent views, that's pretty cool." So Touristam raised a great point. Wait, can you hear me by the way? Yeah, I did enable the microphone. That would be stupid, right? Who would be so stupid to do that? That never happened to me. Shouldn't your intersection not be a general case and only have timing on specialized one? Great point. Right now I assume that all intersections have traffic lights, which is stupid. Something that I'll improve in the process of redoing this. Yeah, basically I will first just copy the old logic which only considers signaled intersections and then try to improve that. Hey, 96 FPS from Mars. Happy Tuesday to you too. Technically it's already Wednesday, so in Germany it's Wednesdays, my dude. You thought the opposite was the default. You mean about timings? Okay, like whatever, currently all intersections have traffic lights and thus timings for the traffic light. Does that make sense? That's what we have right now. I want to make it more general so we can also have intersections with yield signs, or just, I mean, when you have an off-ramp or an on-ramp coming in, that's also kind of an intersection, right? But it just doesn't have any, it's basically also a yielding intersection is my point. Yeah, definitely. The lamest kind of time travel. Do you know what's an even more lame kind of time travel? Existing. Think about it. Okay, let's nevertheless continue where we left off. And my goal for the stream would be, why is everyone joining now? What's up? What is it with like 12:30 of my time? Prototype enum you have. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we have all of that. And my goal for this stream today would be, I'll probably do like, no, I will define a goal and we'll do that much programming and then Q&A and maybe a live call if there's people who are interested. So my goal for today is to first just draw a simple line, a curved line along the straight line gesture, which we saw earlier, and then to extend that to actually draw the correct number of lanes on each side of the road, which somewhere I think right now I just hard-coded as 2 on each side. Like there isn't UI yet to choose the number of lanes. We'll do that later. For today, just I want to first draw just one line in the center and then draw 2 lanes on each side, and once we achieve that, we're done for today, we're good. If I go crazy before, or if I fall asleep, or if I start rambling nonsense, we will obviously stop earlier. Let's see. Snowstorm in Northeast US plus US people come home from work. Let me check. I think I have on my phone a world clock set up. So, okay, in New York it's 7:30 p.m. San Francisco it's only 4:30. That makes sense. So I guess during the week, starting at 0:30 would be kind of a good idea. Which of course goes against my current ambitions of going back to a more normal sleep schedule again. But you know, let's see. I'll try to somehow cover everyone. Maybe I can actually replace sleeping by eating more pretzels. Not sure about that one now. So right. I will actually just, you know, for now, we will just create a vector of prototypes. We don't need to identify them yet. Identifying the prototypes will be important later, where we actually want to construct them into like real roads and real zones. Then we need to somehow, I think, have an identity of the prototype so we can keep track of, oh, this road already existed, so we don't need to demolish it. We can actually just keep this part. Here's a new road, this we actually need to build, and here's a road that doesn't exist anymore in the new plan, so there's no prototype for it, so we remove it. Right? Does that make sense? I guess we want to identify the prototypes with the gesture that created them, but that's a little more complicated. We'll have to figure that out later. We don't need that part for the preview of the plan, which we're doing now. So for now we can just leave it as a vector. We need to derive compact and clone for all of these, which should hopefully just work without an error. Let's see. That compiles, complains. Oh, we don't have a zone prototype yet. Yeah, let's just ignore that for now. I'll add that once we actually implement zones. Right. Yeah, that's nice of you to say. If you're most productive in the morning, you don't have to change files, whatever works for you. Sure. I mean, what's actually funny is that I was very tired before I started the stream, and now this stream feels almost more productive than the first one I did in the morning, where I thought I felt good. So, hey. Whatever. Irrefutable flight pattern. Okay, I'll just leave this empty, whatever. We'll add something in a few. What? Why? This? Does this work? Guess that worked. So let me show you this. I guess all of you who didn't join earlier streams don't really know what the plan manager does. The plan manager is basically the central instance taking care of what I call the master plan, which represents everything that has already been built in New City, as well as all the proposals, so like new projects that are being planned right now that represent changes that you want to apply to the master plan in the future, but that you're still actively working on. Then it also has this UI state here, which actually for each machine of each multiplayer player keeps track of which proposal they're currently looking at, and remembers the identities of all the user interface elements that are currently being displayed for that user, so that whenever the user either changes which proposal they look at, or if they edit the proposal, we can update the interactable things for them, as well as for all other players that happen to look at the same proposal at the same time. So this already contains the seed for real-time multiplayer collaboration on plans, just FYI. It's actually so cheesy to say in spoken language, just for your interest. It's like, I'm too lazy to type for your interest, only that I'm not typing but speaking. Yeah. And we might have what is called a current preview here, where basically the proposal only contains the changes to the current master plan. And the idea is that once you implement the proposal, the plan contained in the proposal actually gets merged with the master plan, and there are certain rules for how plans are combined. But of course we already want to get a preview of the end result of combining these two plans while we're editing the proposal, right? And to make sure that we don't have to like recalculate that every time we render, we keep it around. So the option just says that maybe we have a preview, maybe we don't. When we actually edit our proposal, the current preview which we have becomes invalid, which we represent by setting it to none, to nothing, so that next time we render we see like, hey, is there a preview already calculated? No. So let's create it, and then we merge the proposal with the master plan in a simulated way without actually affecting the master plan, just to get a preview of what the resulting plan would look like. And what we need to do now is that we take this resulting preview plan and calculate our plan result from that, containing the prototypes, so the structures, the more complicated structures that arise from the gestures contained in there. Okay, let me answer some questions because this is probably confusing. Why not make a copy of the proposal and display and edit that? Yeah, no, we edit the proposal, sure, and then we basically make a copy of the master plan, combine it with the current state of the proposal to get a preview future master plan. Let's call it like that. And 96 FPS from Mas is asking, is the master plan global or limited to a region? Right now it's global. That might turn out to be a performance or memory issue where the plan for a huge city might not fit into one computer, but then we will just find a way to transparently distribute it onto several computers, making use of the actor system, so we can still effectively have one global plan that's just distributed over several computers to make the computation possible. Leading into your next question, how big are maps expected to be? You showed off remarkably large maps with parallel simulation processing. They weren't even that remarkably large yet. Like, I really want to go for kind of a whole region around, let's say, I mean, like, what I would realistically want to achieve is that on a kind of good computer, you could run a city of millions, including its surrounding area. Let's say of up to like 3 million citizens. Probably for something crazy like Greater London area or something, yeah, sure, there you definitely need network computers, and that will be quite challenging even then to achieve. That's kind of the scale that I want to go to in the best case. But even then, I mean, the physical size of the region is never the limit. The limiting thing is how much stuff do you actually have in your city and how many citizens does it have. So it's like, yeah, how many roads do you have? This determines how big your plans are and the kind of traffic pathfinding demands, and how many citizens do you have and do you need to simulate the decision making, the economy, and the traffic for. This is the limiting factor, and there won't be any hard limits. It's just, hey, whatever your computer can handle. Right. So we want to extend our plan manager UI state, right? And not just our current preview is not just a plan, but whenever we calculate that, we also now we extend that with a preview of the plan result containing the prototypes, right? Yeah, that makes sense. So what I like to do in Rust, since it has such a strict good type system, is just I represent the change to the code that I want to do in the like most important point where I define stuff, and I just see which code stops working, so which code do I need to update and where do I need to add new stuff. So these markers you place on the ground, one potential use is to mark where you want specific things, and you could come back to them to use them later in a plan, connect them to make a new road. Yeah, you can connect them. Even for a road that you already built, it will also have these markers still active, and you can drag them if you want to like move a road over, for example, and it will be smart enough to understand which segments of the road actually stayed the same and which can be left alone, and which segments need to be demolished and then built with a different shape. So that's really the idea behind the planning interface, that first you have the time to edit your current proposal before it's being built. You can undo, you can move stuff around, and it updates the preview in real time. But even for the stuff that you build, that's also treated as a plan. You can go back to it later and delete the roads, but also move parts of it around. It figures out the difference. All right, what do we have here? Okay, yeah, this will be annoying, so let's probably we need to change less code. If we just add a new field, current result preview. Plan result. Maybe I will invent better names than plan result, but I'll have to think about that off stream. Right. So okay, there will definitely be one place in the code which we need to fix right away, which is when we create a new empty UI state. We obviously don't have a result preview, so here we will have none, like for the preview itself. But now we have here we have this function clear previews, and there we now also need to clear the current result preview. We basically call this whenever we move something around or when we add a new gesture, because then we need to recalculate, because maybe now there's a new intersection. The way I do it right now is that I just completely throw the calculated preview out of the window and recalculate it from scratch. Maybe in the future it can be a little smarter where it actually understands that, hey, you only move this gesture around, so the only things that can possibly be affected by that are these other gestures, and then you just recalculate the resulting prototypes from them. But for now, let's keep it simple, even if the computer needs to do a bit more work, since we're not dealing with huge cities yet anyways. We'll basically leave it like this and let it, with performance things, I like to let them become a problem, where you just implement most of the stuff in a pretty simple way first, so you can be sure that it works correctly. You try the game out, and then if you notice that the game becomes slow, you measure it, you measure the performance, you find the culprits of what is the slowest part, and you take the time to address that, because there will be many things. I mean, this is the classical premature optimization story, but there will be many things where you might be like really trying to be smart in advance and like writing it super optimized, but this code almost never gets called, so that effort wasn't worth it at all, and it maybe something else that you didn't expect turns out to be a much bigger impact on performance, and you should have better spent that time on optimizing that. I guess you get the point. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks for answering these questions for me. So now, of course, the interesting bit is here in ensure preview, where we generate the preview of the future master plan. And now we also want to generate the preview of the plan results that, well, results from that. So, okay, what we want to do, basically this looks, do we already have a preview, or was it deleted because it became invalid? If it's invalid, we need to create a new one. So we call this, how do we call this? Okay, preview plan. And we do this here, which basically just means, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. We take our proposal and we apply it to the master plan to get a preview plan. Then we store that as our preview plan. But before that, now we want to get a preview plan result. And for that we want to do something like preview plan calculate result, and that shouldn't need any external input. It just takes a plan and produces the resulting prototypes, and we will write this function first very simply, and later we can extend it to do all of these different steps of generating lanes, finding intersections, doing zones, what have you. But we'll start simple. The important thing is that we get the theoretical framework right, and then we start filling out the concrete implementation. And then we save that as well. Current result preview is, well, some preview plan result. And then, of course, later we also will want to render the prototypes, so the preview of the created lanes, for example, and we'll adapt the rendering code for that. Now let's just try to, yeah, let's do it like this. We will first just draw the simple curved line, try to get the algorithm correct for drawing a nice smooth line, pretend that's our prototype, draw that, and then, I don't know, I mean, it's getting late. We'll probably leave it there, do the lanes later. You get my point, right? So now if we save this, this should work in itself. It will only complain that this calculate result doesn't exist. So yeah, let's implement that. So this is something that we need to implement. Well, let's do it right around here. So we implement plan actually, and what does calculate result do? It takes self, so plan, and it returns a plan result. And we will just write a very simple implementation here inline. And then we'll see later how we distribute that into different files, because ideally we want to have the code that determines how to create the road related prototype over in the files related to transport, and we want to have the zoning stuff over in zoning, but for now we just have everything in one file so we can see everything at once. And yeah, just move quicker. Okay, so what do we want to do? Basically, let's just create a bunch of lane prototypes. And for that, we iterate over self gestures values. We map them. So we take a gesture. Actually, we filter map them. Okay, if this gesture is if the intent of the gesture is road, then we will want to create a lane prototype for that, because we might also in there get gestures that are actually about zoning, and we just want to ignore them. This is why we need to do this if let here. Now it just should look like this. So then we want to return something. We don't know what yet, else we return none. We can probably do that a bit nicer, but for now I'll leave it like this because it's clear. So what do we return? We return some, and then we need to create a lane prototype from our gesture. So lane prototype is a path, right? What we will, let's actually do it even more step by step. What we will do for now is we just create a lane that follows exactly the straight edges of our gesture, just looks exactly the same. We add the code to render that, and then we add a little algorithm to smooth it out, and that will be it for today. Actually, since I'm starting to get really tired, and I think that would be something great to continue with in the next stream, because again it will be quite visual. Why don't we switch over to the last part of the stream where we do some Q&A. Yeah, so if there's anything you want to know, anything you were curious about, feel free to put it in the chat. If you happen to have a microphone and you wouldn't mind talking about it in person a bit, also write it in the chat. I would be more than happy to set up a quick little Google Hangouts. I feel like that always gives another kind of quality to our interaction in the streams. I really love the patrons calling live streams. We can just quickly do that. Just let me know in the chat if you would be up for that. Otherwise, I'm happy to take your questions in text form. And we'll just do, I don't know, 10, 15 more minutes. And then I'll wrap it up. Oh no, Daneless. Totally missed the second stream. Well, didn't miss the Q&A section. Ask me whatever you want in the chat. Or if you have a microphone, we can even have a call, which would be super cool, Daneless. I understand if you don't have a microphone or if you're uncomfortable with that. But I love talking to you guys. It's always so much fun. Okay. Daneless, you were in an earlier stream, right? So you know they existed in general. How did you now become aware of the stream, and what could I have done to notify you in advance? Same question with even more importance to Dimitri. How did you miss all of them? Where could I have announced them so you would have found them? Because like I added the blog post in general about the hackathon and announced that I would be live streaming in general, and then for every one of them, like this one was super spontaneous because I did something off stream in between where I didn't know how long it would take, so I announced it only, I think, like, yeah, kind of an hour roughly before we started this one. And the other ones I usually announced earlier than that. So I don't want you guys to miss out, especially if you would have had time to watch them live. So let me know what is the best way to reach you. I always post on Reddit and on Twitter. Yeah. Oh, probably Dimitri won't even react to that because he just sees the chat. He's probably not watching live. This one. Oh, okay, so you are watching live. You saw the YouTube announcement. Yeah, seems like most people actually get a push notification from YouTube. So, and you get them, I guess, because you subscribe to the channel, right? So, okay, good. That's good to know. So I'll try to announce them on YouTube or like create the upcoming event as early as possible. I feel that's probably the best way to notify people. While I will also, of course, continue to do the other two ways. So Marco Mesa was wondering, how will I implement zoning? I think I converged on something there where I will actually keep it quite simple in the user interface, which still allows for complex things to do, where basically you draw an arbitrary shape and then you give it a meaning, and it can have exactly one meaning. For example, it can say within this shape residential is allowed, but then you can create another shape which overlaps it for a bit, and you can say here commercial is allowed, and in the overlapping zone, both will be allowed. But it can be about something else as well, like it could specify within this shape, no building can be higher than 4 stories. Or within this shape, buildings have to have a setback of 5 meters to the road. So you have some more open space basically. And this is obviously just the beginning. This can be extended by any kind of rules, zoning related stuff, ordinance kind of stuff that you want to limit to a specific shape. So it's really, really flexible. The challenge is, of course, if you like add lots of different rules on top of each other, that becomes kind of difficult to render and to visually understand. But for that, maybe you want something like filters where, okay, now only show me the zones that are about land use. Now only show me the zones that are about height restrictions, and you can kind of like layers in Photoshop show or hide them. But I think like this, it's something that's simple to use, really flexible, really nicely composable, and also really extensible from others. Hope that made sense. Yeah, that makes sense, of course. Oh yeah, you also missed that. I found the low level memory bug. I told the story 2 times, but I'll tell it again because it's fun. Took me 2.5 hours to find it because I had to guess where it came from. Found it, was a 1-line change to fix it. That's just how it is. You can be glad that you didn't have to watch that. Cool. Any other questions? Anyone up for a call? I don't know. Let me know if that's starting to be annoying, but it's just such a cool thing. I understand that most people are just watching this more as a passive kind of thing and either don't have a microphone around, you don't feel like it. But if there's anyone, it's so much nicer, I think, for the viewers as well as for me to have this more personal interaction. I'll just keep asking in the upcoming streams. Otherwise, I'm sure at some point someone will be up for it. Also, here's an idea which I had since this week and a couple more days is being pretty fucking productive. Why don't we take one of the days and I just do let's plays of other city building or related games and kind of try to play them and enjoy them, but also give commentary or like try to analyze their gameplay and try to learn something from that together with you guys. I think that could be like a fun day off because I never actually played City Skylines myself. I only watched let's plays. I watched quite a lot of them, and like I like to watch let's plays because it makes it even kind of easier to inspect the gameplay because you're detached from it. And usually the cool thing about let's players is that they verbalize their thought process very well during the let's play. And you can really see how they interact with the game, what they understand, what they don't understand, where the game surprises them. That's just super interesting. At the same time, I would really like to actually try it out myself and see how different systems which they implemented feel. And also just I would love to show off some old games like A-Train, which really influenced me as a child and which are a huge influence on Citybound because probably a lot of people don't know that. Yeah, let me know. Let me know if that sounds like fun to you. Let me read the chat in the meantime. In what extent 3D modeling would be useful in the shadow of procedural generation? Well, procedural buildings still contain details and props that are classical 3D models, right? So the whole building might not be a fixed static model anymore, but it might have columns or like window frames, small like chimneys and stuff on the roof, fence segments, mailboxes, trash cans, all that kind of stuff that you have on a house or on its property These are of course classical 3D models that just procedurally place and combine. So that's how 3D modeling would be very useful. Call would be largely Q&A, exactly. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think the Let's Play can also, like you say, be combined with Q&A, or we can really like kind of collaboratively inspect this game. So yeah, I'll have to see how many of these games I can make work on my Mac. Obviously, I can also switch to Windows and play them there, but then I'll have to set up the streaming program there as well, which shouldn't be too big of an issue. Should be worth it. Okay, let's see. How about just in the chat, I will answer 3 more questions, okay? First 3 guys to ask something, I will answer the question, and then I'll wrap it up. Usually, I mean, it always happens that in the second where I say I'll wrap it up, someone asks another really interesting question, and I will probably answer that as well, but let's say 3 questions for now, okay? So Dimitri asks, are you still not a fan of the idea of a layered terrain? And I'm afraid you will have to explain to me very shortly what you mean by that. Yeah, please explain that and then I'll answer your question. Off topic, where are you living right now? Quite late in Germany already. Yeah, it's quite late. I'm living in Munich. Watch a lot of Quill 18's Let's Plays. I also watched that guy. And all you learned is the poop must flow. Well, but that's SimCity Let's Plays then, right? Sure, you're welcome. Like I said earlier, like I really love these streams. It's a lot of fun. Layers like, oh, that's like the visual style, like where they create the hills and stuff from like actual wooden boards, so you have this layer thing. I was thinking that that might be a cute like visual style for the planning mode, where in general, like that would be super cool. No, I think I will seriously consider this. Not sure about the layered thing, but in general, imagine if by default, if you're just looking at your city, it looks more like realistic-ish, right? But then when you go into planning mode, I mean, you have that in some cities and in Skylines to some degree, but what if it actually like kind of swapped styles at it, and it starts to look like the simplified architectural model that's almost like made from wood, and maybe the trees are like these typical model trees. So you really feel like you're editing like an architectural model. That would be fun. I'll consider that, and it's already been kind of a bit part of the style that I was going for. Players play on flat terrain anyway. You mean like they prefer flat maps because it's easier to build stuff there? I totally understand that, but I would actually like when I implement terrain, I really want to make sure that it becomes an interesting gameplay element and that people will, as a challenge, want to tackle more complex terrain. Obviously, then the way that roads interact with terrain and buildings interact with terrain has to be a lot better than in the existing city games, because then otherwise it's just annoying. And of course, I won't place in flat map, but some of the like coolest towns and cities I know are exactly on difficult terrain. Good example is probably Genova in Italy, which is a quite large harbor town. But the problem is that the coast is basically a hill that directly goes into the sea. So the city is like super three-dimensional and multi-layered, and it's one of the most interesting cities I've ever seen. And that would be kind of my holy grail for city terrain interaction to make stuff possible like there, where you actually have different layers of the city coexisting, and like you have staircases or even maybe public elevators like they have there, and buildings right next to each other that are actually on completely different levels of the city. Of course, tunnels, underpasses, overpasses, all that kind of stuff would be super cool to have. Okay, so that was... Okay, I'm not counting the where was I living question. So 2 more questions, guys. Okay, bring it on. So importing maps from the real world. First, terrain, yes, obviously. And importing OpenStreetMap is also something that sounds super interesting if you want to like play around kind of with an existing city. And yeah, there it would be really interesting to see how much information can you gather from there. You can probably get a rough approximation of how wide some roads are and then like guess the actual lane configuration of them. Even more interesting would be land use, so zoning and existing buildings and the businesses in there would obviously be cool if you could get a like somewhat accurate approximation of what's actually where in the city. And I think the way we're gonna do that is just that I make all of the stuff like the planning interface, the existing structures, the economy so accessible for modding. I mean, everything is accessible for modding, but to structure it in a way that you can easily interact with these systems. So someone could actually write an OpenStreetMap importer as a mod, maybe first a simple one, and it can become more and more elaborate and generate more and more from OpenStreetMap or additional sources of information. That would be super cool, but it's probably not something that I would focus on because it's like a variant of gameplay. I would focus on just the purely fictional city that you create from scratch or from some pre-generated random terrain. But yeah, of course, there's people who want to do real cities, and I think that's a super nice use case for a mod. Okay, cool. One more question. Can I just briefly tell you a bit about the next few steps you will do? So I will try to get road laying working based on a new interface. For that, I need to copy some stuff from the old implementation. I need to improve some stuff like the intersection logic to allow for different kinds of intersections and also transitions between different lane configurations of gestures that you kind of connect. And then once that works, I will see, okay, can I create roads and have cities like in the previous prototypes with traffic and economy? And then as a very simple extension, add zoning to the planning interface, have buildings actually take the zoning into account so they spawn correctly. Probably then I will implement the accurate lot shapes again. So right now buildings are really just things that are placed at a single point, which looks okay for these small buildings. It's of course very stupid for the agricultural fields because they're now just a rectangle that's like awkwardly placed. Hopefully it doesn't intersect with anything else. But what I want to implement then is that the zones are actually subdivided into lots of sizes that correspond to the different needs of different users, so that agricultural zones would be subdivided in like very large plots for actual whole fields, whereas small residential areas would be subdivided very finely into tiny lots where small buildings can be on them. That's what I would be doing then. At this point, I would consider the zoning prototype done. I would release that and then start the next prototype with the next topic, which is housing demand. So the interaction between zoning and the economy and development of buildings, where both businesses as well as households take the attractivity of different points in your city and your city in general into account when choosing to relocate and when choosing to build new buildings, either for homes or for businesses. And beyond that, I didn't really plan yet. Something that I really want to get going because it's something that I want to be a central gameplay element, is what I would call the thought or feeling system, where citizens don't just have like a job and they follow their daily routine, but they generate actual opinions, impressions, thoughts about their daily life in the city that you can then inquire. And for me, the gold standard of that so far is how it works in Roller Coaster Tycoon, where you can get both, like you can click on individual people and see what they've been up to, what they are thinking about the things that they interacted with in your theme park in this case, but you also get these really nice summaries and can get an overview of the like general problems, wishes of the guests of your theme park. And I want to go for something similar to that and then see how that can be done better, how that can be extended more interesting, how can you do that well for a city builder. Obviously Chirpy and Skylines, the Twitter bird thing, is a fail. I don't want to replicate that, but I think having thoughts for individual citizens really can give the game a lot more depth, both in the sense that they become more believable individuals that actually tell you something useful, and at the same time give you an overview of the problems and potential of your city on a high summarized scale. Okay, I will end it with the endless question. Do you think Citybound will reach a level of simulation where it can be used to kind of plan cities for the real world so that all needs are fulfilled and the traffic works, etc.? That would be super cool, of course. I said it a couple times, my main goal first is to make it a fun game that teaches you something about how real cities work, that like approximates the problems and the experience to some degree, that allows you to like see on larger times and space scales, and just to implement it in such a rigorous and professional way that it can potentially be used to plan real cities or like to showcase the need for a certain change in a real city. And I would love to actually talk to real city or town administrations about how something like that could be useful to them. I'm also planning to talk to my university because there is like, well, urban development professors who are using existing tools to simulate traffic, for example, and obviously they could be interested in something like that. I already talked to them once, but I need to suggest some more concrete use case or project to them. All of these are options which I would really happily do, but first I will just focus on the game because I feel like there's the biggest audience. That's what feels the most important to myself, and then we'll see it from there. Well, yeah, I'll think about advisors and if I can maybe have something like that as well. What I would want them to look like. So thank you all very much for joining. I'm really glad that you appreciate these streams and that you enjoy them. Hopefully, I can't repeat it enough. I enjoy them a hell of a lot. Here, let me actually switch to me. Did this hotkey work? I'm still new at this. Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining this one. I'll do another one tomorrow. I will try to come up. How late is it? Not okay. It's fine. I will try to come up with the time and announce it right after I end this one. So if you have time tomorrow morning-ish, check out the subreddit in like 10 minutes, and Twitter, and I will already have like a definite time when I start tomorrow. I can't tell yet when I will do the second stream tomorrow. That will be something more spontaneous again. But yeah, I would be more than happy to have some of you tune in again. Until then, have a nice day, night, morning, evening, wherever you are, whatever your lifestyle is. Take care and see you all soon. Thank you so much for joining.